Hey, what's going on? This is Mike Westerdal. I am your host for the Strong by Design podcast. Welcome to another episode. I'm joined with my boy here, Jared Haley. He's our videographer. He's our in-house pastor and the perfect guest for this show.
Heyo.
So we read a book together recently, not like side by side, but
Word by word.
I read it, you've read it, we both read it, and it kind of inspired us to talk about a few things today.
Yeah.
So, cheers to that. For those of you that can't see this because you're listening,
That's good. Maybe hold it right up there. There you go.
All right.
Good.
This is actually Coach Chris's cup. It's from Parks and Recs. It says Woman of the Year, and it's got a pic. Do you know this guy's name?
That's Ron Swanson.
Ron Swanson as Woman of the Year. So you're like, what kind of episode is this going to be? I'm starting to already get a little offended about this. Yeah. What are we talking about?
It's churning inside your gut.
It's getting a little uncomfortable already. Well, maybe this cup will trigger you a little more.
There you go.
Does this trigger you, Jared?
What does it say?
It's a cartoon picture of Donald Trump.
Okay.
It says, "You are a fantastic brother, really great, really terrific. Other brothers, total disasters. Believe me, ask anyone."
Yeah. Actually, I bought that for my wife, except it says wife instead of brother.
Oh, okay.
It says you are a fantastic wife.
So you're not offended by the cups.
I'm personally not offended, but I can guarantee you that there's somebody out there that is absolutely
I'll tell you what,
offended.
if there's someone listening that's offended by these cups, I'm actually offended that you're offended.
Yeah.
So that's how far it's come, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah.
It's like people are offended, and then people are offended that those people are offended, and it's come down to a hyper-offended society.
It's I don't even think that it's a matter, like, we'll get into this, I'm sure. I'm certain that there are things that, okay, that's offensive, but it's how we react to it. It's the little things that we get offended by, that it's like, really? Is it really that big of a deal? The things that we blow up and just seem like so off the scale. And then there's things that I think should be offensive that aren't. But I guess it's the world that we live in.
Well, it's definitely hyper offensive, though. It's
absolutely.
Like, it seems you can't say much without somebody getting upset about it.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, the book that we read was called Unoffendable. It was by Brant Hansen. A friend of mine who was going through a divorce was recommended to him by his kind of counselor at the time. Then he gave it to me, and I read it too. Nothing to do with divorce, just because it was interesting and just seemed helpful to kind of help deal with the emotion of anger, really.
Yeah, that was a big part of this book, was not only dealing with the offense, but also dealing with your response to the offense and being just intolerant or angry about whatever the topic might be.
Well, do you find it in day-to-day life, seeing people kind of, I don't know, we use the word trigger, getting upset, easily angered, offended, all these different things in day-to-day life?
Well, I think you just open up your Facebook page, right, and you start scrolling through that, and it doesn't take long to find somebody who's upset about something, and it could be it could be a pop culture thing, it could be a political thing, it could be, I'm mad at my boss for not saying what I wanted him to say. There's just... Are
you mad at me?
Yeah, I actually was waiting for this show just to bring it up.
Just to talk about it publicly?
That's right. Yeah, that's how I roll, But, I just... like I said, you don't have to go very far to see that it's happening, and so hopefully we'll be able to discuss a little bit today about what we learned from this book, and how maybe we can be a little bit less offendable in our day-to-day lives.
For sure. I think when I got back, when we were planning this episode, I just had a business trip to Denver, and I forget the name of the hotel, but there was 2 people that just got offended by my existence, really.
Yeah. Yes, do tell, Mike. So I know that's commonplace around here in the workplace, but
people being offended by me?
Just by your existence. No.
Sure. Well, we had a dinner in a private room, and one of the waiters wound up leaving the dinner and didn't want to work and wouldn't come back the next day. And he heard someone at the table I was sitting at someone had pointed at him and said that he looks like our friend Bedros Koulian. He's the author of the book Man Up. He's a friend. He's a business mentor. And someone just said, "Oh, he reminds me of Bedros." I'm not sure how that was offensive. Maybe he knows Bedros and was offended by it.
Maybe he doesn't like his message. I don't know.
Maybe he probably has no idea who Bedros was, but I don't think he really knew what we were saying, but maybe he heard or felt like someone looking at him or talking about him.
Yeah.
To the point that he left work and wouldn't come back the next day. And
All
really,
of a sudden so your waiter just switched in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah. He was done. He walked out. And it was only like 2 or 3 total working that night. This is at like a nice hotel for business meetings and stuff.
How did you know he walked out? Did you just all of a sudden notice
because
he wasn't around
they
anymore?
went and talked to the group leader and told them that he was offended and he uncomfortable and was leaving.
Okay.
So then they asked us what happened, and it became a big thing. So it was talked about. That was like the first experience. The next night, after dinner, which was off-site from the hotel, we stopped up at the rooftop bar before turning in for the night. And there was a group of people up there, and one girl that asked like where I was from, and I just said Florida, and I think I had an American flag T-shirt on or something.
How dare you?
Yeah, and right away, she really just started ranting about Florida, everything she can't stand about Florida, all the problems, and we don't got to get into all the politics, but there's strong feelings about Florida one way or the other.
Yeah.
You either love it or hate it. It's kind of like Trump, right? It's like people can't stand him or they really like him. There's not a lot of people that are just like, whatever. I feel like Florida's kind of getting like that a little bit.
Yep.
And the way I chose to respond, I had a good conversation earlier in the night, just listening to a Navy SEAL friend of mine who's a black man, and we were talking about racism and kind of things he'd experienced or not experienced, how he looked at it, and really just listening to him and not talking, I felt like I learned a lot. And then when I went to this, I was like, I'm not going to like argue with her. I feel like that would just confirm all these biases or ideas that she had about me already. It's like, oh, white Christian guy from Florida. I know what he's all about. Like, what am I going to do? Start like arguing with her and like just prove everything true that she already thinks about me? So I just listened, and then I did have some counterpoints later on, but it was in a calm kind of way, more in a question format after listening to her. And it kind of diffused the whole thing. And one of the other people, one of her friends was like, I really like how you handled that. That was really good. And I was like, oh, thanks. And then I just said, excuse me, I got to go to the restroom, and left and went to bed.
I think it's really interesting whether we're the person who is offended or we're the person on the other side who did the offending. When that seems to erupt, we no longer are thinking about what is the end result that I want. Right, where we get into this mode, it's almost like that competitive nature comes out of us, where you just want to win. You want to know that I bested you, or that I win the argument. And I think it's important for us when we are thinking through how do we respond when we personally are offended. It's not me coming and attacking you as a person. It's the end result is I want you to hear me. I want you to understand my perspective, and I want us to actually be friends at the end of it. Where a lot of people, I don't think that that's necessarily the goal that they're. It's hard to not be it's hard to be unoffendable when you're not looking at the big picture. You're just kind of looking at it in the heat of the moment.
Sure. Now, that sounds easier with people that you care about or people you work about, friends, family, people that you choose to spend time with versus maybe a random person you don't know that you feel is not honoring you. Or
someone that you don't even have a conversation with. I mean, you can be offended by a commercial
TV,
or... Right. And so, but there's still, I think, healthy ways to deal with that, and then particularly from the point of view that we'll be coming from is, how does God want us to respond to those things? How would Jesus respond to those things, right?
I think a lot of times it's not even about us. We make it about ourselves. I mean, advice for my daughter who's in 6th grade, sometimes there's girls at school might say something rude to her, and it's very easy for her to take that to heart, take it to her identity, start to take that as a truth. And I'm like, really, honey, that probably had nothing to do with you. Does she say this to other people too, or just to you? It's like, no, she talks like this to a lot of people. I'm like, okay. And is there anything going on? Like, what else is going on with her? Because it's probably not something about you. It's probably something about her, and it's just coming out on different people. So it's like someone could actually say something rude to you, and you could still choose, which is an interesting concept too, that you can choose your feelings or how you respond or react to it, because it's not about you a lot of times. It's something they're going through that has nothing to do with you, and something kind of gets taken out on you.
Right.
And then that doesn't make it okay, but I think it helps knowing like you're not the cause of this.
It's really hard to be the person too that isn't responding with your feelings, because it feels like everyone around us, like that's just, they don't know any different. Like, I feel this, I feel that. You know, that's the hedonistic culture of, you know, if you feel it, do it.
Sure.
Where just because I feel something doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. You know, I can feel, I mean, Jesus talks about that, right? Like, Sermon on the Mount, for example, he says, if you hate someone in your heart, well then, you've already murdered them in your heart, kind of idea, you know, like just because you have that feeling doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do to act on it. And we're fallen creatures. We're sinful by nature, and so by nature we are going to automatically go to that space that is actually against what God would have us do. And so we have to really pause and take a step back. And I think that's difficult for our culture. We live in a culture where your value is based a lot on what you stand up for. And so you have a whole generation of people that are looking for that next thing that they can stand up against, you know, and who can I fight for? You know, I'm going to fight for the little guy. And not that that's a bad thing, but it almost seems like we are being pushed to the extreme, because that's the place that we're going to find our place of value, which isn't necessarily, well, it's 100% not where we should be getting our identity from, is what new social injustice am I standing up for?
Sure, and it almost seems the extremes you're talking about could be, I am going to be quiet and non-confrontational and not offend anybody.
I see
and
you
keep
staring
to
at me
myself.
as you say that, yeah.
Right. Or the person that says anything and everything that comes to mind. It's like one or the other. Where's this kind of balance in between?
Right.
And a lot of this is about for other people, but just for yourself, for your own sanity, walking around being angry and upset so often. How is that self-serving?
And how is it helping just generally around you anyway, like bring other people up and edify the world around you?
But we get these feelings. Now we're feeling something that we choose or control, or something that kind of just happens. Because I mean, if you're just, whatever happens, and you got no control, no accountability, and like you can't, whatever feelings you get flow through you. And
well, that's what separates us as human beings from the animal kingdom, right? Is that we can actually stop and think and process and decide, am I going to act on that feeling or not? You know, dogs, you know, cats, these things, they have a brain and they're thinking through things, but it's all feeling, right? I'm hungry, and so I respond to that. I'm whatever emotion they're feeling, like that's what it is. But that's what makes us different. That's why God has separated us from them, is because we have that ability to be like, okay, let me process through this feeling real quick and not just respond in the moment. And I mean, Brant Hansen says, you know, when it comes to these things, that it's okay to actually, I'll just read the quote. He says, we can recognize injustice, we can grieve it, we can act against it, but we can do so without rage. And so, you know, it's not about seeing these things that we're offended by and just saying, you know, like burying your head in the sand. Like, that's not good either. I think that's the point that you were trying to make. But what does it look like for me to, you know, I think like Martin Luther King Jr., right? I mean, he was all about that passive, you know, hey, we need to stand for what's right, but we're not going to do so in a violent way.
Sure. And it's interesting too about controlling feelings. We're focusing more on like anger and that branch of feelings, but really there's no one in the world that has a remote control that they can point at you and say, make Jared happy, make Jared mad, make Jared jealous. It's like no one has that power, but we give it up so easily.
Yeah.
Where we let people control us. And the people that care about us and love us, and they still wind up upsetting us, and they're not even wanting to or trying to.
Yeah.
Like, my wife gets mad at me sometimes, and I'm like, I had no intention at all of like trying to get you upset. And I don't control your feelings. And if I did, I wouldn't be pressing mad at me button.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's interesting what you're comparing us to animals, because we do have the feelings, but we have the thought and the ability to kind of decide what we're going to respond and react to. And that brings up another thing about, for me, I think feelings they're real. We have them, and we can feel them and acknowledge them, but that does not always mean that these feelings are true. Have you ever felt like inadequate or like a loser, or you're not equipped to do something?
Every night when I go to sleep at Mike.
But you know that God has you redeemed,
yes.
And God says different, and his truth says you can do this, and I can use your weakness for the plan anyway. And it's like, there are truths out there that we don't always feel the truth. We feel the feelings.
Right.
And the feelings are there, but they're not real.
Right.
Like
and you can
girl
acknowledge them.
Sure.
They're valid. Like, it's okay to feel things, but then you take that and you process it, and you recognize, okay, why am I feeling this? You know, what other things in my past or things happening around me in my life right now are causing me to feel this way in this moment. You know, but and so I think that's where we have to just back off just a little bit, you know, with being so easily offended. And, you know, I think I've been wrestling with this a little bit, because I think about like sex trafficking and you know, things that go on, I know, like at the Super Bowl and all these different things. And I think, is it okay for me to be offended at those things that they're happening at that space? And yeah, I think being offended and, you know, standing up against it is a really important thing for us to do. But for me to go around and just yell at everybody that's, you know, I think that there's an appropriate way to go about it and an inappropriate way to go about it in order to get that result that I want.
Can you stand up for something, though, without being angry? Because this is the part that, with the book and that we talked about, that I struggle a little bit with, and you might not have had time to prepare or think about this one.
That makes it exciting.
Right. This is like
real stuff.
A curveball for you. So God gave us all of our emotions. And we also know that Jesus showed some anger at the church when he flipped over the market tables when they were selling things at church. Like, that seemed angry, right? Like flipping the tables and getting mad.
Yeah.
And
he wasn't angry.
Maybe he did it really nicely and just gently flipped it over, but it doesn't seem like that.
Peter, help me real quick. We're just going to set this over.
Sound like he got mad.
Yeah.
And God gave us all of our different feelings. So how can we be given something like that then that we're not? The book talks about, Hansen reminds us, anger is always, not sometimes, associated with foolishness, not wisdom. So when you're talking about fighting and standing for truth, can we do that without anger at all? Or is anger okay sometimes? When is anger okay, or is it just not? Right.
And I mean, Scripture says it's okay to be angry, just don't sin in your anger, right? And so I think what's in control? And that's true with any emotion, right? Like, I've seen people that are like way over the top joyful, and I'm like, there's no way that can be real. You can't be like that all the time. Like, what are you trying to hide? What are you trying to cover up? You know, and so I think acknowledging the emotion, but then processing and finding a right path forward that's honoring to the person that you're trying to help or the person that you're trying to show truth to, and also is honoring to God, because ultimately my battle is not against you, right? If I'm offended by something that you've done, in a worldly sense, I'm going to think that it's me against you. But the reality is there's a lot more going on spiritually than we can even see or recognize, right? Paul says our battle's not against flesh and blood, right? It's against the principalities of darkness, right? And so if I start to think of you as, hey, we're actually on the same team here, we're just not seeing eye to eye, and really there's other things that we're against, how can we seek that truth together in an honoring way to you, in an honoring way to God, knowing that my result is not beating you, my result is actually you and I discovering truth together.
It's a good way to look at it, especially with a loved one. Do you want to win the argument with them, but now you've damaged the relationship? It's like, is that really what the purpose is? To prove I'm right, you're wrong. Okay, I win, but really I lost.
Yeah.
Because
I don't ever win. No. Even when I get angry, I don't win. Like, there's times that I won. I'm not very good. I don't know if you know this about me. I'm really bad at getting angry, in the sense that I don't do it very well.
So you didn't even need this book.
Well, it confirms some of my suspicions, you know. But it's one of those things that when I do get angry, I don't know how to communicate it in a healthy way, and so I end up doing things that are just no good.
Like passive aggressive?
Not even passive aggressive. Like I take it too far. So I'll just tell this story that Christiana was playing with the kids upstairs one day. They were having fun, like wrestling on the bed or whatever. I'm downstairs and I'm just like, the kid stuff is everywhere, and I start picking it up, and eventually, like, you start having this argument in your head, you know, because you're just getting frustrated with all the junk that is everywhere. And so I ended up going upstairs and just like yelling at everybody. I'm like, everything's a mess downstairs, and just like rip into everybody. And I say, you need to get downstairs and clean it up, you know. And in my mind, I'm thinking I'm justified, you know, like, they're not supposed to have toys downstairs anyway. They're not following the rules.
And sometimes enough is enough.
It feels disrespectful that they are not listening to the rules that we've given them. And so they go and clean, but I end up ticking my wife off because she's like, dude, we were up here having fun, like connecting, and you just come in here with no context and just like blow up on everybody. Like, if you would have came in and been like, hey, there's stuff going on downstairs. I know you guys are having fun. When you're finished, can you, you know, there's different ways that you could approach it.
Sure, but then if she did the same thing yesterday, and then now she's telling you not to do it, and then that adds a whole nother layer to it.
Sure,
it's like.
But just because she did it doesn't mean it's right.
Right.
You know, and I can easily admit that the way that I approached the whole thing, I felt
it's a good
terrible
point.
about it.
It's a good point, but there's the whole other, like, helping or criticizing each other in parenting that almost becomes like a bigger issue than what's going on sometimes.
Sure.
It's like, for us, it's like, yeah, the kids are a joy, and they're also super challenging sometimes.
Right.
And we take turns over who's frustrated.
Yes,
so when
true.
she's frustrated,
we do that too.
It's the same thing like you just said. If she gets frustrated, then I'm like, you didn't have to do it that way.
Right.
But then the next day I'm doing it, and now she's saying that to me.
Yeah, yeah. And I like that. I mean, I feel like it's good.
Good back and forth balancing each other out.
There's a design there, like there's supposed to be two parents, you know, that help balance each other out. And we do that with parenting. We do that with our finances. We do that with our spirituality. We do that with all kinds of things where it's like, hey, maybe you could do that a little bit differently, you know. And it's kind of, you're lifting each other up as opposed to dragging each other down.
That's good, but it takes somebody, you know, willing to hear that and be part of it. That's cool.
Right. I've done a lot of counseling over my pastoral years and things like that, pastoral counseling, and I've actually been through a lot of counseling. And one really important thing that I always bring up is there's only one person that I can control, and that's what you were talking about earlier with the remote. And I just think whether it's this situation with parenting, whether it's with something bigger on a social injustice thing, if someone's mad because of a mug, you know, I can only control myself. I can't control, in a healthy way, I can't control anything else around me. You know, you can be manipulative, or you can be domineering, or you can do all these things in a very terrible way and control other people, but that's not who God has called us to be, you know. And so I just think through all of these things when we're thinking about being offended, being not offended, how do I process these things? It always comes back to that reality that even in a marriage, I can't control her. I can only control myself, and I can only work on being better myself. I can give nice, you know, encouraging things to her, but at the end of the day, she's the one that has to decide what she's going to do, and I have to decide what I'm going to do.
I think you can be a good influence on each other and set a good example.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, along those lines with parenting too. I'm blanking on the book right now, but it was talked about in counseling for us too, and it was helping with parenting, and it talked about when kids are smaller, we start off as helicopter parents, where we kind of hover over them and make sure they don't die and do all these things. And that kind of, when they get a little older, it seems for a lot of people where you turn into a drill sergeant, where you're just kind of telling them what to do, and then they're listening or not listening, and you're just kind of barking orders. And people get caught in that phase. But then as they get older,
that's the phase that we're in, I think.
I think it's a phase most people are in. But at some point, maybe around middle school or maybe even younger, I mean, the sooner the better. But there's got to be a transition, because eventually they leave, and then the relationship's going to be damaged, where you have to transition more into a coach. And ultimately, it's because of your point where you're saying you cannot control other people. And when they're younger, they have to listen to you because you're bigger and stronger and control all the money and where they're going. But as they get older and get more freedoms and able to do things, and you don't have that kind of control anymore, it's more about helping them make the right decisions and realizing you don't control. They're their own person. You're just there to kind of help them. Yeah,
and I think that that's a way that we can approach trying to help other people that have been offended by different things as well, is coming back to that idea of, I can't control you, I can't change your mind, right? There isn't a Facebook, no one is scrolling through Facebook going, oh man, I'm completely changing my worldview because of the thing that you posted, you know? Just, it doesn't work that way. People are going to think, people are going to process, and so...
Plus, you only see your same stuff that you look at anyway.
That's right, yeah.
It's the whole bias confirmation.
Absolutely. And you can always, I always say, you can find a news article to back whatever opinion you want to believe in. So, I think that we need to step back, look at the bigger picture, realize that you are not my enemy. And I think he actually, Hansen mentions that in the book as well. He says, it's not our job after being invited to the party. He's talking about, hey, you've accepted Jesus. You're now a part of the kingdom of God. You're invited to the party at God's house. And now that you're there, it's not your job to try to keep others from coming. It's actually your job to invite more people to come to the party. Which is
almost like... Is that almost the judgment or the self-righteousness, which is something that turns a lot of people off from Christians because maybe they don't know much, they've never met any Christians, or they don't know much about it, or the people that they did meet came across judgmental, and then they stereotype the whole like movement or faith that like, oh, that's what it's about, but we're people and we mess it up. And
you know what's really hard is when there's someone that's been like convicted of molesting children, or someone that's like like a mass murderer, and you think, as humans, we want that person to have justice. We want that person to have, their judgment come to them, and it's really hard because that's not our role. That's not our responsibility. It's still our responsibility to see transformation in people, and to give people grace, and to really hope the best for them, that God will transform them, and that's difficult to do in those situations.
Yeah, that's a huge point. Just
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think that even helps when even small things that are offendable or make you angry, realizing you don't have to have justice served. Ultimately, God will handle all of this.
Vengeance is mine, says the Lord.
Right, like we want revenge, we want justice, we want to make it fair, but God will make it all fair. Like we don't have to do that, and that's a hard pill to swallow. But it could also be some relief if we accept that and believe that. You probably have heard bits and pieces of this. There's all kinds of. I'm feeling offended this last week, which is why I think it's good timing on this podcast to get reminded of all this stuff. We've got 3 or 4 ongoing business-to-business transaction deals where it feels like we're getting taken advantage of, not being treated fairly. We ordered some stuff and didn't get all of our stuff, as you know. And
I do know.
We're short $6,000 of video equipment, and it's been a month and it still hasn't been handled. Our fulfillment house is charging us fees we didn't know about, losing inventory on us. And then we got a collection letter for some advertising that I never even knew that went live. And there's no stats showing that anything was displayed or that there were any clicks or anything. So it's and they just keep, there's 3, 4, 5 of these things going on at once that just is irritating me, and I want to fight back in each of these situations. But then I think it was a God thing yesterday. I had coffee with one of my daughter's friends' dad. So we're just getting to know each other. He's like, hey, do you want to get some coffee?
Yeah.
Met him up yesterday morning. He's an attorney, and I actually mentioned a few of these things. Just like I'm in fitness, if I meet somebody, they're like, hey, here's what I had for breakfast. Is this a good breakfast? Here's my workout. What do you think? I'm like, here's my small claims issues. And I'm like, this is probably below your pay grade, but what do you think? And he was, he's like, this is like a waste of your energy and your time, and ultimately, like, you're probably just going to lose. And even if you took this to court, you're going to spend a lot of money. There's probably a clause in the contract that says something that they can weasel their way out of it. You'll waste money and energy, and like, it's not that much money. Like, move on.
Right.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
He's like, you could send a letter just to kind of show you're serious as like a last ditch attempt from an attorney. But again, this is like, it's like, let it go. Let God handle it.
Yeah, it's hard.
You know?
Man, it's so hard to be patient where it feels like if I don't do something, nothing is going to happen. And that is just very counter to the way that God asks us to live, right? God says, no, you step back, you be patient, you let me take care of it. Yeah, but God, if I don't do this, God, you know, it's not, nothing will happen, you know. And so there's kind of that balance. And I always think about that with Jesus's life. Because Jesus said, I don't do anything except my Father's will. And so Jesus was very intentional to go be on his own with the Father so that he would know what his Father's will was for that day. Because Jesus had the power to heal, but he didn't heal everybody. He didn't have like this, he wasn't just like, you know, and you get healing, and you get healing, and you get, everything had a purpose, but he didn't, it was always because the Father was telling him, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so we have to follow suit with the way that Jesus did what he did and sit back and say, okay, God, here's the problem ahead of me, you know, what are the steps that you would have me take that are aligned with, you know, your direction and your will, as opposed to me saying, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then pray that God sprinkle a little blessing on this thing that I'm doing. You know, it's reversing that order a little bit. And so when I say that we're supposed to be patient and wait, that doesn't mean that we're never supposed to do anything. Like, at some point you have to do something, but it's doing it according to the leading of the Spirit, as opposed to doing it as according to, I'm just going to do it because I'm angry. Right,
responding versus reacting, which is really the application to the takeaway that we're getting from this. Is the feeling is there, the sin is responding in a bad way to it.
Yeah, 100%.
And then I think things can build up too. And we have another episode Chris did, What's Your Release? He talks about different ways. He's talked about it a lot on the show, but he's had a past of like getting easily angered, and he has shown such transformation in the last couple of years. Like, you might not even have really noticed it. But
we see it every once in a while, kind of sneak out.
It sneaks out once in a while. It used to be a lot worse. But you know, praying about things, like, you can give this stuff. You don't have to hold it all. You can give it to Jesus and say, this is the problem. I don't even know what to do. And I'm feeling upset. Just take this. There's other releases too, right? Like working out, which we talk about all the time. Just getting those good hormones flowing. And you usually can't even explain it, but when you're done, you feel better. Right?
Even when you're sore the next day.
Even sleeping, right? Like, we had sleep yoga.
We did.
Yesterday. And I was a little annoyed beforehand, and then I woke up, and Jen's like, how do you feel? And I'm like, I'm not annoyed anymore.
That's good. That's really good.
Sleep yoga, by the way, is pretty much like company nap time.
It was amazing. Basically, we lay down on the mat, and she starts telling a story, and then we fall asleep.
Like 5 minutes of some light stretching, and then she said, lie down, and then she said something about feeling your fingers and toes one by one, and that's all I remember.
That's all I remember, too.
I woke myself up a few times, scared that I was snoring and bothering everybody. And then I just like in and out of like falling asleep.
I woke up once when she sprayed us with something.
Sprayed us.
I was like asleep, and all of a sudden I'm like, what is wet on my face? You know? But it was good. The last point that I wanted to make, Mike, is just the reality that when we are living our life, you're living your life through your eyes. I'm living my life through my eyes. But it's recognizing that I am not the main character in the story. And it's hard for people to not think that you're the main character. And I think about that when I'm driving in to get to work and, crazy guy is swerving in front of me and things like that. And I think, is it more important for me to get to my job safely or more important for you to get to your job safely? Well, it's actually equal. We both need to get there safely, and we both need to get there on time. My life is not more valuable or more important than your life. And so I think if we can start to take that perspective when it comes to these different areas of being offended, and realize, okay, I'm not the one. The focus shouldn't be on me and what I want. Really, it's stepping back and saying, God, what is your truth, right? It's that transformation of the mind that we read in Romans 12. Praying that, God, my ways are not your ways. I want to understand your ways, and I want you to renew the way that I even think and process information to be in alignment with who you are and your will and your truth, as opposed to my experiences and my culture and my way of life. So,
which really about God's will, which ultimately is loving others, not just completely all
and
about
judging
all
them
about
and telling
me.
them why they're wrong.
Right. Brother to brother, we can hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
But for other people, that's between them and God, and not something for us to be criticizing or reprimanding anything. We're supposed to treat everybody with kindness and love.
Yep, and let them know how great the grace of God is to them.
And ultimately, remember all the things we've done wrong in our lives, and we've been forgiven for that. So who are we to then hold all these little things over everybody's head?
Yeah.
If 100%. We can be forgiven, maybe we can do the same.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
That'll be a follow-up episode on
absolutely.
How to forgive.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Well, thanks for your insights today.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And to the listeners, it's another awesome episode of Strong by Design. If you haven't done it, go leave a 5-star review on iTunes. Write something about the show. This just helps more people find the show. We do this for a ministry, really just for fun, just to help people. And the more people that can hear it and the higher we can move up in the charts, the more people we can help. So if you enjoyed this, share it with some friends and family.
Go buy the book.
Yeah, this is a great book too, Unoffendable. Check that out. And we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah.